Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, and today we're taking a look at the upcoming Warhammer 40K Battlesector. Set to release July 22nd, I've had the chance to check this game out during its beta periods, and thanks to the developers providing me with a review key, I've been able to spend quite a bit of time in its release build taking a look at exactly what works and what doesn't in this turn-based tactics game. Good Warhammer 40K games have historically been few and far between. There's always a potential for greatness, and I was excited to see if Battlesector was going to hit the mark. If, after watching this review, you decide to grab the game for yourself, you can do so at my game store linked in the description and pinned comment down below to support the channel as you buy. But let's not jump the bolter. Let's take a look at what Warhammer 40K Battlesector has to offer. Set on the moon Baal Secundus in the aftermath of a massive invasion by the hive mind Tyranids, Battlesector has you lead the Blood Angels chapter of the iconic Space Marines as you uncover the remnants of this invasion and some twists and turns along the way. While the game has a skirmish mode and multiplayer that both let you play as either faction, the single-player campaign has you playing as the Blood Angels over the course of about 20 or so missions. The gameplay loop is split into two parts. Before you dive into a mission, you're able to manage your army, adjusting which units you want to have access to for the upcoming mission, balancing your picks versus the points cost, and the number of empty slots you have available. You can also upgrade your various HQ units. These are characters that join you along the way as you progress through the campaign, each with their own skill and talent trees, giving a variety of tools for you to use. These can include weapons of various kinds, as well as buffs to stats and off-map assistance, as well as support skills. These skills are bought using tokens that are earned by accomplishing objectives, and these tokens are a shared resource between all characters, meaning you'll be, again, picking and choosing who to upgrade, when, why, and with what. With all this done, you actually dive into the mission itself, and the single-player campaign keeps this very linear. There are no randomly generated side missions or alternative paths through the story, instead offering a straight narrative for you to play through. The mission itself will have a points limit around which you'll need to pick your final units, and then you can deploy them as needed before kicking off the turn-based tactical gameplay where you can expect all the usual elements of such a game. Movement points to move around, action points to use skills or take shots and swings at enemies, and considerations such as range, weapon type, armor, etc., etc. You navigate terrain, and while height advantages don't apply as a factor, you'll certainly be working around and using cover to try and flank your enemies or keep yourself safe from their ire. From Overwatch to Zones of Control, things are pretty par for the course, but there are a few things this game does that helps embrace that 40K vibe a bit better. Individual squads in a unit fire individual guns, so the more entities in a unit, the more damage it's able to put out, and that means you have something to gain in reducing model counts even when you're not able to completely wipe an enemy unit out. This makes a difference in who you choose to attack based on the units you have on hand and in range. You can issue multiple orders at once, often creating a very cinematic experience, which is honestly just absolutely exhilarating to watch, and you'll constantly be looking to take advantage of your momentum as well for various effects. See, as your units kill enemy entities, they'll gain momentum, as individual units, but also collectively, to help generate points you can redeem to take advantage of support options. When an individual unit fills up its momentum bar, it gains access to either an extra action point or a souped-up version of one of its skills, your choice. This really helps push you to be aggressive, since the only way to get momentum is through killing enemy entities, and this adds another layer of strategy to the engagement, as you'll want to pick the right units to soften the enemy up with, and the right units to finish the job will be acquiring that momentum. Different missions will have different objectives. Sometimes you'll be eliminating specific units on the field. Sometimes you'll have to hold a certain location, flip switches at specific areas, etc., etc. But they all boil down to hold off against a seemingly endless swarm. Also, kill them. The map can sometimes be quite large, and impressively so actually. There are times when you'll find yourself trying to navigate around choke points to avoid trouble, and other times you'll find yourself flanked or otherwise underprepared for the swarm. I was actually surprised at the scale and layout of some of these maps, as I was really expecting very tight and linear experiences, and while we're not looking at, XCOM here, there's enough to keep things engaging. I was genuinely taken aback by the level of kind of flanking and tactical thought I needed at times, and how the AI would kind of be spawned at different spots, forcing me to maybe split my troops up or, again, try to avoid choke points and things like that. It came as a surprise because, yes, I was expecting very, very small maps, but nope, we got the exact opposite. And that, to me, is one of the biggest strengths of the tactical gameplay. The skirmish mode pits you against the AI across various maps, and multiplayer is a really interesting element because it exists in a few forms. You can either play hot seat multiplayer, meaning both players are on the same device taking turns, or you can play online in two different ways. The way you're probably familiar with, where you and an opponent are playing at the same time, but also a less commonly used approach that I'd like to see more often for turn-based games: asynchronous multiplayer. This means that you and your opponent take your turns at your leisure whenever you can be online, and this allows you to play with more people regardless of schedules and time zone and all that jazz. Honestly, it surprises me that more turn-based games don't do this. It really frees players up. It really lets you play with folks that you might otherwise not have been able to play with because of, schedules. People can get really busy at times. It's just a really nice consideration, and I wanted to give props for it being, taken into consideration for this game. Now, multiplayer and skirmish both will allow you to build army lists to field, though there isn't much room for customization. No army painter or unit-specific upgrades, and for those of you wondering, no, there are no other factions, at least not at launch. It's Blood Angels and Tyranids. Now, audiovisually, the game does a pretty solid job. The sounds of gunfire is great, no matter what gun is being fired. And the fact that the whole thing is fully voice acted is fantastic. It's usually on the chopping block to help with smaller budgets voice acting. But not only is Battlesector fully voice acted, it's also well acted. The actors have done a very, very good job, and the sound designers have done a fantastic job getting the voices all gravelly and making the Voxcasters sound, somewhat mechanical. I think it's just absolutely brilliant and needs some kudos.
I have activated the lensing array. I will catalog all warp aberrations indicative of synaptic Xenos activity.
Hold this area against the Tyranids, brothers. Leave none of the Xenos filth alive. The librarian must complete his work.
The photo mode is a fun extra too, and the models are varied and detailed enough to the point that it's worth getting down there and checking them out up close in the various situations you find them in. Photo mode is not something I often bring up for games because it's become such a common thing, but with Battlesector, I felt like photo mode was so nicely implemented, it kind of felt like you were looking at minis on a tabletop, and so I just wanted to give it a little shout out. Now, there are some cool units on both sides of the field, and I don't want to spoil too much, but you can see some of the interesting ones here. It is absolutely amazing art brought to life. The game is fairly well written too. It embraces the somewhat campy style of the universe. It's overly grandiose, and it's suitably full of grit. The exposition does a good job, I think, of letting outsiders in on the universe. A constant issue I have with Warhammer games is that they don't make it easy for non-Warhammer fans to get into them, but the introductory cinematic and the mission briefings here do enough to let the players understand what's going on. See, I'm fairly familiar with Warhammer lore, fantasy, and 40K, so it's easy for me to get caught up in all the cool stuff that's going on and the characters I'm seeing and all that kind of stuff. And it's the same for, I think, many Warhammer fans, right? You get caught up in all the cool, lore stuff and all the fluff, and it's like, wow, I get to see all these events unfold. And a lot of Warhammer games use that as a veneer to hide, games that aren't that great. I say this often, Warhammer games tend to rest on their laurels and tend to rest on the fact that they're Warhammer games, they've got the license, so they have an existing fan base that's, eager for more, because it's a cool universe to have games set in. So this is one of those things I always look out for as an indicator of if the developers are resting on those laurels, or if they have tried to make a game that is a good video game first, that just so happens to be set in the Warhammer universe, again, either fantasy or 40K, which is why I want to point out that, yes, I do think they do a good job here of making a fun game with some fun mechanics and fun systems, and lo and behold, it's Warhammer 40K. It's not perfect, obviously, but it gets close. On the topic of things not being perfect, though, the game has some issues worth highlighting. For one, with regards to player familiarity, the plethora of stats and numbers thrown at you when targeting an enemy are great. It kind of makes you feel like you're looking at stat sheets and stuff while playing tabletop. But somehow, despite all the information that is given, the game makes some assumptions about what a player will or will not know, like having these strange Tyranid weapon names on display without any indication of what they mean. Are they ranged? Are they melee? Should I expect them to be dangerous? Are they easy? Those are the kinds of considerations that aren't taken by Battlesector. Like, I'd expect the Space Marines that we're playing as to know what they're dealing with when they see it, so as a player, I'd like to have that information communicated to me so I can act accordingly. This is a, strategy and tactics game after all, and intel is a very important aspect of that whole field. But that's the least of our issues here. See, every mission, no matter how different its primary objectives are, seems to always end with, wipe out all remaining Tyranids. This might sound like a minor complaint, but it definitely gets a little grating as you go along. At a certain point, it feels like there's no value to anything you've done before that primary objective was completed, because afterwards you're going to get a new objective, which is just wipe them out. All of them. Your cleverness or top-tier tactics aren't rewarded, and it's very easy to narratively make the player not have to kill all the Nids too. Have them retreat for some mysterious reason. Use a cutscene to show the aftermath of the mission, or any number of things. I'm not saying this needs to be the case every mission, but boy oh boy did it start to get exhausting having to finish off low-tier Tyranids after having already taken out the beasties, the big ones. It's anticlimactic. That's sort of a polite way to put it, I guess. Beyond that, progression also kind of misses the mark. While HQ units have skill trees and weapon choices, the only thing tracked for other units is what missions they've taken part in. And while that's cool, it's not really progression. There's no veterancy, there are no squad upgrades like giving one entity in a unit a better weapon or a grenade or a rocket launcher or what have you. This removes any reason to actually care about your units. As long as you succeed in your mission, it doesn't matter if literally all of your units die, because you can just replace them for free afterwards. There's no cost, there's no loss, there's nothing to it. That, to me, is a big miss. The game basically has no stakes, and nothing really matters. Even if just damage carried over, or a dead unit was simply made unavailable for a mission or two, there'd be something to care about. There'd be a reason for actually being careful and using tactics, but without that, without any risk factor, you're just kind of coasting along. The overall experience of playing Battlesector is a fun, but perhaps casual one. I enjoy the game to see where the story was going. It was fun setting up epic cinematic moments and hearing all the gunfire and seeing a bunch of Nids get blasted into pieces. The art is an absolute pleasure, and as I was saying earlier, the voice acting and writing really has the right feel to it. With that said, without any stakes, without any progression, I felt like I was never paying the price for mistakes. I felt like I was never getting rewarded for the successes. I never felt like anything really mattered. Again, I didn't feel like I couldn't afford to lose a unit, and at times I could literally just set everybody to Overwatch and just let the Tyranids die in the meat grinder. This was especially handy when the final objective of, basically every mission came up. Kill all remaining Tyranids. Alright, everybody on Overwatch, let them march towards us. A few stragglers we'll have to chase down and kill. Now there are some cool ideas and some cool units and cool visuals and cool moment-to-moment gameplay, but there's a lacking tension. Now, not everybody needs or even wants that, but I certainly do. It's where I derive a lot of my enjoyment from games. Now yes, I could crank up the difficulty and it would get harder, but difficulty isn't the issue here. Again, even if half my army gets wiped in a mission, they can all be replaced with a few clicks. Nothing matters. And while that might seem like some sort of cool, edgy message about how all these lives being lost to the Tyranids are inconsequential, it doesn't make for tense or meaningful gameplay. I hope this review has given you some insight into Battlesector and everything it has going for it and not. If you're interested in grabbing the game, you can do so at the link in the description and pinned comment down below to support the channel as you do. I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, and concerns, since I'm always curious about others' opinions or hesitations. I'll answer what I can in the comments down below. Now, if you're interested in more strategy previews, reviews, let's plays, and more, don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel. And as always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis, and a big old thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.